In our environments and on our hardware, we can have a certain amount of fault tolerance. That is, how much can break before it is a problem. To figure out what the right amount of redundancy and resiliency on our system is, we can use our internal SLAs or service level agreements. If a system is very critical, then we need a high degree of redundancy. If it's not, well then we don't. And one of the things that can give us that redundancy and give us the ability to recover after a disaster is backups. And while backups are very important, it isn't a lot of organizations treat it like an afterthought. It's something we set up and then we forget about it, which is not a good idea. There are different types of backup we can use, and the most common ones would be a full backup, we back up everything. An incremental backup, we back up whatever was changed since the last backup. A differential backup, we back up whatever has changed since the last full backup. And then a copy backup. A copy backup is pretty much the same as a full backup. We back up everything, but we do not clear the flag. And which of these we use and in which combination really depends on our organization, how much data we can stand to lose, how big of a backup system we have and how fast it is, how much data we have, and how fast we need to be able to restore. For our backups, we will build a policy that tells the system what to back up, what not to back up, and how long to keep the data. We might say for a full backup, you need to keep that for a year. But for an incremental backup, you only need to keep that for 30 days, or something like that. And if we have a well-designed backup system, we would normally have different categories we would put our backups into. So we can have backups that say full backups are kept for a year, just like we talked about, incremental are kept for a week, and we back up every day at midnight. Once a week we do a full backup, all the other 6 nights we do an incremental backup. Then we have another policy that might be more important or needs to be kept longer. It might back up all the data at the same time and at the same intervals, but we might need to keep the full backups for 7 years, or whatever is required by the industry we're in. In most of the organizations I have worked in, we have had for the full backups a 1 month, a 3 month, 6, 12, 36, maybe 5 years, 7 years, and then an infinity retention. And yes, infinity means we keep it for as long as we're around. Most of the 5 and 7 year retention policies are built around banking or healthcare. The PCI DSS or HIPAA requires information to be kept for a certain amount of time. And we keep the data for as long as it's useful or it is required by regulation, whichever is longer. It is most common to run the backups outside of business hours because it will have an impact on the systems they're backing up. But if our backup system is old, or we have a ton of backup, then we might choose to run the smaller and less important backups in the daytime and the large important ones after hours. So let me give you an example of why it is important to keep an eye on our backup policies and tweak them every so often. I worked at a hospital. The database of our most important application was getting bigger and bigger. The administrator responsible for the backups had set it up with a monthly full backup and then 30-day incrementals. So every 30 days, it would do a full backup, and the other 29 or 30 days of the month, it would do the incrementals. No problem. If everything broke down, we could still restore again. But then the database grew, and at some point, it didn't finish within a month. The full backup took over a month to finish, and that was partly because there was a lot of data there. It was also because they hadn't upgraded the backup system for 10 plus years. So the backup administrator thought, I'll just change the full backup to every 3 months. Then it can finish on time. But he didn't change the incrementals. And the incremental backups only had a 30-day retention. So when we hit day 31, the first incrementals were gone. When we hit day 89, we had almost 2 months of patient data that would have been lost if everything crashed. We obviously fixed this problem. But you just can't go in and change a backup policy without thinking it through. And to make the backups as small as possible while still backing up everything, we would most of the time exclude some things. Like we don't want to back up the operating system, the trash can, certain system folders. If we're doing a full restore and we've been compromised, we don't want to use the underlying OS. We want to be able to restore the applications on it, but not the system itself. We build a new one for that, and then we restore on top of it. And if we have systems in our environment that are extremely important or we need near to real-time backups, Then we just do every hour, every half hour, every whatever makes sense for that application, we do an incremental backup. Let's take a look at the different types of backup a little more in depth. A full backup. The name kind of says it all. We back everything up that's specified in the policy. That would most likely be the entire database, or it could be the entire system. A full backup clears the archive bit. The archive bit is a little flag that's raised whenever data is changed. That way the system knows what was changed since the last either full or incremental backup. Once it's cleared, everything is backed up. As soon as the data changes on the system, the archive bit pops back up with whatever has been changed. We do most often not do the full backups every night because they are huge. They take a lot of time and they take a lot of storage media. But if you look on the graph over here on the right, Monday we back everything up, Tuesday we back everything up. Even with the size of the database growing, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, all the way through the week, we back everything up. An incremental backup backs up everything that has changed since the last backup. It does also clear the archive bit. So if we look up here on the right, Monday we do a full backup. Tuesday we do a backup of whatever changed since the last backup. Wednesday we do the same thing, whatever changed since the Tuesday backup, and so on. The upside to the incremental backups is they're really quick to do. We only back up what changed since the last full or incremental backup, since the last time the archive bit was cleared. The downside to them is if we do one monthly full backup and we do incrementals every other day of the month, if we need to restore, if we fail on the last day just before the full backup kicks in again, we would need to get the full backup from a month ago and then the incremental tapes from every day since then. We can use up to 30 tapes this way. And this would obviously take a lot longer to restore compared to if we use just a full backup and a differential backup. So let's look at differential backups. The big difference in differential backups compared to incremental backups is they back up everything since the last time the archive bit was cleared. If we only use differential and full backups, that would have been the time when the full backup was done. So the pros and cons of differential backups are kind of the opposite of the incremental backups. If we use the same scenario we used before, we do a full backup and then we do differential backups every day for the rest of the month. Then if on day 30 we have to restore, we just take the full backup and the last differential backup. 2 tapes, we restore everything. And then the downside is we back up everything that has changed since the last full backup, which can take more time. So depending on our requirements, we will use full and incremental or full and differential, and we can use them in the same environment but not on the same systems. Which we use is dependent on what's important to us. If we have a ton of storage and we need to be able to restore as fast as possible, we would use differential backups. If we do not have a ton of storage and we're okay with waiting some hours to restore, well then we might use the incremental backup. I mentioned the copy backup earlier. The copy backup is exactly the same as a full backup, but it does not clear the archive bit. We would most often use a copy backup just before we do system updates, patches, any upgrades. We want the full backup of the system. Since we do not want to mess with the backup cycle, we do the copy backup, and if something happens, we can revert to that copy. I think I covered the archive bit already, but really it's just a little flag that indicates that something has changed since the last full or incremental backup, and it indicates what we need to back up now.